Okay, so a few weeks ago, I was at the Women's Weekend Away, and I was asked to speak on the joys and sorrows in community. There were some logistical hiccups on the morning that I had to speak, so I was a little bit unsettled on that day. And then I was agitated because I was feeling very unsettled. And that agitation threw me off how I would normally prepare when I'm about to speak. And then that unpreparedness made me feel unsettled, which made me feel agitated. And that cycle continued. A little known fact about me is that I like control. I like having control. I like being in control. In fact, all the control. I love it all. And when I got up to speak, I realized that I was feeling unsettled, I was agitated, and I was very much not in control. And to make it worse, when I opened up my laptop, the stand was higher than I am, so half the room couldn't even see me. So I read through what I had prepared, but I felt very disconnected, and I believed it showed. When I was done, I shut my laptop and I looked around the room, and I just asked the Lord to lead me in that moment. And I honestly don't remember everything I had said from that point. But I trusted that the Lord will breathe in on what I had prepared and communicate his message. You see, I had done the preparation prayerfully, but the delivery was just words on a page until I invited the presence of the Lord to take over. And that is the essence of presence over programs. The program isn't the issue. The issue is when the program takes precedence over his presence. Because programs can fail, but his presence never will. So as part of the current season we're in called Living Stones, today we're going to be looking at presence over programs. Our main scripture today comes from the book of Exodus, chapter 33, verses 12 to 23. Moses said to the Lord, "You have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways so that I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people." The Lord replied, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Then Moses said to him, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth?" And the Lord said to Moses, "I will do the very thing you have asked, because I am pleased with you and I know you by name." Then Moses said, "Now show me your glory." And the Lord said, "I will cause my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." But, he said, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see my face and live." Then the Lord said, "There is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory goes by, I will put you in the cleft of that rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen." Before Moses makes this bold statement, "Now show me your glory," we need to understand the journey that got him there. Moses had walked with the Lord in complete dependence from the moment God called him to free the Israelites, through the plagues in Egypt, through freedom from the Egyptians, and into the wilderness where Moses got a front row seat for miracle after miracle, which showed God's grace and love and provision. Throughout the journey, Moses knew his limitations, and to accomplish a task so big, he needed to depend on the Lord. Yet even Moses, who now says, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us," had moments when he wanted to do things his way. When Moses was called by the Lord to lead the Israelites, filled with doubt and fear, he questioned the Lord, wondering how the people of Israel would know that he was actually sent by God. And so the Lord told him, "Moses, what do you have in your hand?" And he said, "A staff." So the Lord asked him to cast the staff onto the ground, and when it did, it turned into a serpent, which was the insignia of the crown of the Egyptian king, well, the Pharaoh. Moses became afraid and he hid, and then the Lord told him, grab it by its tail, and when he did, it became a staff again. So the Lord showed him that and 2 other signs, and he said, if the people of Israel question, just show them these signs. This is the same staff in Exodus that he used when the Israelites had fled Egypt and stood trapped between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army. God instructed Moses to raise his staff, and when he did, the sea parted. Later at Rephidim, when the people of Israel were thirsty, God asked Moses to strike the rock, and water flowed. But in the book of Numbers, the Lord gave a new instruction. In verse 12, he said, take your staff and speak to the rock. Instead, Moses struck the rock twice, and God's response was dire. Because you did not rely on me to sanctify me in the eyes of the people, you will not bring this assembly into the land I have given them. Sometimes we expect God to move in ways he's moved before, and we miss what he is doing right now. Limiting God to our past expectations is dangerous. Here, Moses and Aaron missed out on the promised land because they relied on a method instead of the presence of God. And God reminds us constantly that he's doing a new thing, and yet we are wanting him to repeat what he's already done. We see something work once and assume that's the formula, forgetting it only worked because of the presence of the Lord. In Leicester, there's a festival called Glastonbury. It is a tribute event where talented performers sing songs from famous artists. It's a vibrant celebration of music, I've read. But the artists themselves aren't there. It is just their songs. And in contrast, the Glastonbury Festival features the actual artists performing their own music. And the difference in impact is so clear. In 2025, so this year, Glastonbury drew an audience of 210,000 people, while Glastonbury welcomed around 15,000 people. Ticket sales reflected this too, £138,000 at Glastonbury compared to £12,000 at Glastonbury. Why such a stark contrast? Because people don't go just to listen to the music. They go to see the artist. And that speaks deeply of how we should come to church. We shouldn't come here for the programs or the structure or the routine. We should come here to see the Lord. Just as the presence of the artist transforms a concert into an unforgettable experience, how much more should the presence of the Lord transform this gathering into a sacred encounter? Programs may inspire, but his presence changes lives. We cannot build God's kingdom without him. When God instructed the building of the tabernacle in Exodus 25, he said, have them build a sanctuary for me so that I may dwell among them, make it exactly according to the pattern I show you. Exodus 31, God speaks of the craftsman Bezalel, who is called to actually help build the tabernacle. In verse 3, he says, I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom and skill, in understanding and intelligence, in knowledge and all kinds of craftsmanship. Even Solomon's temple was not a blueprint by a human. David received the plans by the Spirit. All this, David said, I have in writing because the hand of God was on me. It wasn't a brainstorming session. It was presence-led. God has never asked us to build without him. We are his temple filled with his Spirit. Extending his kingdom is not innovation, it is obedience. Kingdom growth doesn't happen in a meeting room. It happens in the upper room. So in my work, I'm an IT consultant. So I move from all kinds of industries, like live food factories that sell snakes and locusts and mice, to electronic assembly lines for cars and defense systems, to bakeries, and very recently, a cheese factory. And while some core principles do overlap, there is never a one-size-fits-all. The moment we try to take what works perfectly in one environment and then drop it into another without listening, adapting, or understanding the people, it fails. Because processes without discernment of the environment is a lack of wisdom. The kingdom is not a production line, even though that's what we try to do with God. We see something that worked once, a method, a structure, a service format, a prayer model, and we try to replicate it like a factory process. God doesn't move in duplication. He moves in the response to our obedience. Just like each site I walk into requires attention to context, culture, and voice, each situation in our lives, our home, and our ministries requires the presence of the Lord. There's a powerful moment in David's life, King David from the Bible, that captures the danger of choosing programs over presence. It is recorded in two places, in 2 Samuel 24 and in 1 Chronicles 21. David had made a decision to count all the fighting men across the nation. Now, counting people wasn't automatically wrong. There were many times in Israel's history where God himself had instructed leaders to take a census. The issue wasn't the action, it was the motive behind it. David wasn't responding to a prompting of the Lord. He wasn't seeking direction. He wanted security in knowing how strong his army was. It looked like leadership, but underneath, it was a shift in dependence to human strategy instead of God's presence. Joab, his military commander, hesitated and questioned the order because even he could tell that it wasn't born from trust. David was doing what had worked in other nations and in previous seasons, but without God's leading, the same action had dangerous circumstances or consequences. It shows us something really vital. The presence of God makes something holy. Without him, even a familiar method can be dangerous. So when David stepped into strategy without surrender, the covering that came from God's presence was lifted. And what had started as a leadership decision very quickly changed into a national crisis. The nation came under judgment, and their protection from the Lord had been lifted. David realized almost immediately that something was wrong. His conscience was stirred because he knew the decision had not come from God. The result was devastating. What he thought would bring him security had brought him vulnerability. But God made a way back. And this is where the presence of God triumphs over programs. The Lord gave David a specific instruction, not to scramble for a strategy, but to build an altar, not a plan, an altar, not a system, an offering, and the return of his presence, well returned. When David was offered the land to build the altar at no charge, he insisted for paying on it in full. I will not take for the Lord what is yours and not offer a burnt offering that costs me nothing, David said, because he knew that honoring God's presence required more than just lip service. As soon as the altar was built and the sacrifice was offered, the crisis stopped. The plague ended. The place that was marked by failure became the very ground where God's presence would dwell. That threshing floor where David returned to the Lord became the future site of Solomon's temple, where generations would come and encounter him. That moment, David laid down a program. God laid a foundation for his presence to rest on his people. We so easily fall into the trap of counting our resources. I remember a time when I was completely broke. And in that season, I relied fully on the Lord to get me through every day. I had even started praying the Lord's Prayer every day. And because it was suddenly so real to me. I would pray, give me this day my daily bread, because yes, I needed bread. I would say, forgive me my trespasses, because I needed his grace. I'd say, lead me not into temptation, because I needed his strength. And I definitely prayed, deliver me from evil, because I needed his protection. Every line became a lifeline. So while I was preparing this message, I was really convicted. I realized that I rely now more on my resources than I do on the Lord. While I was preparing this, I was going through some issues at work, and I was trying to decide whether I should stay where I was or look for another job. And my first instinct wasn't to pray. My first instinct was to scroll through social media or to look on job platforms. But every single job I've ever had has come through miraculous doors that I could never have opened myself. And then I got to think, when did that switch happen? When did I move from trusting God to trusting systems? And I think it's because we live in a performance-based culture. We're constantly consuming content. We're comparing ourselves and we're trying to keep up. So we create programs and routines and schedules and strategies, not to stay organized, but to avoid failure. And here's the thing, programs aren't bad. They help us plan and prepare, but when they become the source of our security, they quietly replace the presence of God. And is failure even something to fear? Thomas Edison had nearly 10,000 unsuccessful attempts at inventing the incandescent light bulb, the light bulbs we use. His response, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Every one of us has failed at something, and we didn't give up. How do I know that? Because not one of you crawled in here. You all walked. We start out celebrating progress, like when children take their first steps. We cheer, we encourage, we don't expect perfection. But somewhere along the line, we begin to expect ourselves to get it right the first time. I think it's fear. It's fear of getting it wrong, fear of mishearing God. So instead of waiting on his voice, we turn to programs and strategies and schedules and systems. Because they're predictable, we feel safer. But programs can't replace presence. They can support us, but they can't guide us. Mary and Martha are mentioned 3 times in Scripture. And all 3 times, Mary is found at Jesus' feet. The first time is in Luke chapter 10. Martha is busy, distracted by all the preparations, but Mary chooses presence over performance. She sits at Jesus' feet, listening, resting, and receiving. Now, as we move into the other 2 moments where Mary is mentioned, I want us to imagine we're there, watching it unfold in real time. And to do that, we need to set aside a few things that we know already. We need to forget that Judas betrayed Jesus. We need to forget that he's a thief. And we're going to ignore all of John's commentary, whether it's in brackets or not. So we're going to start in John chapter 11, verses 1 to 3. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. So we're going to skip verse 2 because it's in brackets. Verse 3. So the sister sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. By the time Jesus gets there, Lazarus has already died and he's been buried for 4 days. Martha goes out to meet Jesus first. And when Mary hears Jesus is nearby, she runs to him and she drops to her knees, sobbing at his feet, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Mary believed that Jesus could only save Lazarus while he was still alive. It never occurred to her and Martha that even death could not stop Jesus. Jesus raises his eyes to heaven and he prays. And then he shouted, Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus walks out. Now we go to John chapter 12, verses 1 to 7. 6 days before Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume, and she poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of this perfume. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, objected. Why wasn't the perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. We're going to skip verse 6. We're going to go to 7. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. So if we read this moment without John's commentary, here's what we'll see. In John chapter 11, Mary watched Jesus defeat death when he raised her brother. She stood in grief, believing that Jesus could only help while Lazarus was still alive. Her faith had limits, and she thought that the situation was beyond saving. But then Jesus arrived and everything changed. He didn't just comfort her, he called Lazarus out of that grave. And in that moment, Mary saw something she had never seen before. When Jesus turns up, death bows. In John chapter 12, the 6 days before Passover, when she anoints him, it's not a random act, it is an act of worship. It is a revelation. She's not just pouring out perfume, she's pouring out worship. She's honoring the one who overcame the grave, the one whose power she now understands in full. The first time she thought Jesus could only heal. Now she knows he resurrects. She has seen his majesty. She has tasted his glory. And her response is extravagant. And it is intimate. And it is deeply prophetic. Mary didn't act from a point of duty or tradition. It wasn't scheduled or programmed. It was an overflow of a heart that had encountered resurrection power. She didn't need a program or a system to tell her what to do. She had seen the face of the one who holds life and death in his hands, and so she knelt at his feet again. And when Judas tries to redirect the moment to a better use of resources, Jesus defends her because presence always outranks programs. My mother was adopted and had a very complicated relationship with her biological family. And she was always on the outside looking in. And that shaped the way she related to my brothers, my sister, and I. I guess she didn't know how to just be with us. I remember being very heartbroken one time, and I was so deeply hurt. And she wanted to help, but she didn't know how to. So she cooked my favorite meals, and she bought me things, and she took me to temple after temple to find someone to fix it. And I'm sure she thought she was doing the right thing. But all I wanted was just 5 minutes of being with her. I would have given every gift, every trip, every plate of food back, just for her to sit with me. And I wonder if that's what Jesus feels. I wonder if he's saying, hands up and step away from the planner. Just be with me. Does he want our time with him more than the things we do in his name? My mom died, never having learned how to just be with us. But it's not too late for us to learn how to be with our Father. And you might find that hard to do, perhaps. You need some guidance. Well, I have good news for you. A few people got together and they wrote a book. It's called the Holy Bible. Some of you may say, I'm not a big reader. That's okay. We have a very anointed team of musicians here at Coastline Vineyard who will create a space for you to spend time with your Father every Sunday, twice. Perhaps you're saying music isn't my thing. Well, that's also okay. Just call him. The Lord is near to all who call him. And if you feel discouraged, remember Moses? In Exodus 33, he says to the Lord, "Now show me your glory." And then God hides him in a cleft on a rock and covers him with his hand so that he would not perish. Moses couldn't see God's face then. But in Matthew 17, at the Mount of Transfiguration, a bright cloud overshadows Peter, James, and John, and God's voice declares Jesus as the beloved Son, instructing the disciples to listen to him. And verse 3 says, "Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking to Jesus." Moses finally got to see the Lord's face. When we prioritize the presence of the Lord, we get so much more than we ever imagined. Moses asked to see the Lord's face, and centuries later, he stood face to face with Jesus. He may not have got to step into the promised land, but he got to stand face to face with the promise fulfilled. God is not just a promise maker, he is a promise fulfiller. So no matter what program you came in with, lay it down and invite his presence, because altars will always outlast agendas. And one moment with the risen Lord will do more than a lifetime of effort without him.
Hey Coastline, thank you so much for joining us. What you might not know about being online is that in person, when we meet, we have amazing work for kids and for youth. That's for anyone ages from 0 to 18. We've also got some kids stuff online as well. We believe that they get the same Holy Spirit that we do. Why not invite any children, any young people you know to church, because things are happening amongst the kids and youth, and it's really exciting. You don't want to miss out.